I've always said jiu-jitsu is one of the greatest products I ever saw in my life. I wouldn't have invested 30 years of my life into jiu-jitsu if I didn't believe that with all my heart and all my soul. I have a fervent belief that human beings in most skill activities, not all skill activities, but I will say combat sports for sure, can reinvent themselves in 5-year periods. Now, you might be saying 5 years, what's magical about 5 years? Mike Tyson was 13 years old when he was taken in by Customato. By the age of 18, he was beating world-class boxers in the gym and had already made a strong name for himself in international boxing. He was already a known figure. It was 5 years. There are numerous examples of people doing far better than that in 5 years, winning medals at world championships and even Olympic Games in that 5-year period. This is not an unrealistic goal. There is a lot of empirical evidence to show that people have done this in the past, a lot of it. So if you fully immerse yourself in a sport with a well-worked out, well-planned training program, there is a mountain of evidence to show that in a 5-year period, you can go from a complete beginner to like very, very impressive skill level, to the point where you're competitive with some of the best people on the planet. You can reinvent yourself in these 5-year periods. What happens with most people is they get to a certain level and they get complacent, they get lazy, and they just keep doing the same old thing they've been doing. But if you're diligent and you're purposeful, 5 years, you can accomplish an awful lot. And as I said, there's a mountain of evidence to show it. We are all subject to fortune, and fortune can be good and fortune can be bad. Life is in many ways beautiful, but life is also tragic. You just never know. So luck does play some role. Even things like where you're born, the location of your physical location in the world, or even the socioeconomic location can play a role, which could be detrimental or favorable. So yeah, luck does play some role. Thankfully, it's one of the smaller elements. I do believe that a truly resourceful mind can overcome the majority of what fortune throws at us and get to goals, provided you're sufficiently mentally robust. Ultimately, you have a set of choices, and those choices that you make will be an act of self-expression on your part. Some will prefer this, some will prefer that. That's where you come in as an individual. Jiu-Jitsu is an art and science which looks to use a combination of tactical and mechanical advantage to focus a very high percentage of my strength against a very low percentage of my opponent's strength at a critical point on their body, such that if I were to exert my strength upon that critical point, they could no longer continue to fight. I've always said jiu-jitsu is one of the greatest products I ever saw in my life. I wouldn't have invested 30 years of my life into jiu-jitsu if I didn't believe that with all my heart and all my soul. But like any great product, it has its deficiencies. Jiu-jitsu always had 3 major deficiencies: leg locks, takedowns, and thirdly, the one that no one talks about, the ability to impose top position once it's gained. A huge part of my career has been the recognition and the attempt to change these 3 great faults in jiu-jitsu. As much as I love jiu-jitsu, we've got to take a step back and take an honest look at it. It's got these 3 deeply entwined faults within it. Leg locks was the most obvious one. In a game which was supposedly all about control leading to submission, there was an arbitrary rule that 50% of the body couldn't be attacked. That was lunacy. And over the last 10 years, I believe it's fair to say we've reached a point where that is no longer the case, that is a great weakness within jiu-jitsu. The younger generation of jiu-jitsu, I would match them against any grappling art in the world on leg locks with no fear whatsoever. I couldn't have said that 15 years ago. a huge part of jiu-jitsu is understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the human body. There's parts of the human body that are shockingly robust, and there are other parts that are shockingly vulnerable. The major joints, and of course the most vulnerable of all, the unprotected neck. If jiu-jitsu was just about knowledge, then all the 60 and 70-year-old red belts would be the world champions. They're not. Jiu-jitsu isn't won by knowledge, it's won by skill. Knowledge is the first step in building skill. Building confidence is the key to championship performance. And the single best way to do it is to take away the innate fear that we all have of bad outcomes that makes us naturally risk averse. When you don't believe you can be pinned, when you don't believe your guard can be passed, you'll take risks because there's no downside to your actions. An unpinnable person and an unpassable person doesn't have much to fear in a jiu-jitsu match. You can come out and fire with all guns blazing because then at the end of the day, no one's going to hold you down, no one's going to pass your guard. That's your first two goals in jiu-jitsu. They're the most boring goals. They're not exciting to learn. No one wants to come in their first and be told, okay, you're going to practice escapes for the next year of your life. Okay, it's like, are you kidding me? But that's what you got to have. That's your first skill. And that's what I push upon all of my students. You'll see almost all of them are very, very strong in escape skills. They know that if things go wrong, they can always get out. They can always live to fight another day. And that is what gives them the ability to attack without fear. All human beings are naturally risk averse. This is a bias which is deeply seated in all of us. I'm sure you're well read on people like Tversky and etc. who talk about this all the time. For your viewers, there are numerous psychological experiments that have shown that most people, to the point of irrationality, fear loss more than they are excited at the prospect of an equivalent gain. And there has to be a sense in which you can't be too forgiving. You have to test hypotheses. But on the other hand, you can't be too ruthless either. You have to look for promise, and my advice is start slow. Like, again, the analogy of lifting weights. You don't lift the heaviest weights on your first day. You build up, you work progressively over time. Now, you also have to have some common sense here. You can't be too forgiving, but don't be too quick. Everything you do should be done with the aim and the understanding that this is going to make me better.